Nancy Green here with Film Critique. This was very interesting to me because I remember hearing a lot about Attica when I was growing up, but nothing specifically about the prisoners, just this type of things that were already in the media as you showed in the documentary. And I found the contrast between the family members of the guards, the prisoners, and the prisoners themselves to be very interesting. So what do you have to say about that and how it works in the movie? And also with how people would basically kind of, try to put all of the prisoners into the same category when there are violent criminals, but there are also innocent people, wrongfully convicted, nonviolent criminals, and that sort of thing.
I think one of the things we wanted to do in the film was have the prisoner's character come through, have their humanity come through. And I think that you really do. I mean, you see, one of the prisoners is funny, he talks about being drunk in the yard and having fun. Others are very, very, very serious about it. Others, you can see the trauma, live still on their faces and in their voices. And so, we wanted them to be real human characters. In the same way, we felt that we wanted, the townspeople and the town to be a character, that it was part of the story, that Attica was 250 miles upstate from New York City in the middle of nowhere. It was an all-white town. And to understand what happened at Attica, I think you also have to understand the town and the mindset of the guards and of the families of the guards.
Yeah, well, I think that, there's a way in which in the current discourse that we're having around prison reform and even abolition, that we there's a tendency for us to kind of talk around the edges and the margins of that conversation. What I mean is that we kind of have that conversation in the wrongfully convicted, low-level offender places that feels very safe, it feels comfortable, it feels kind of very morally clear. But I think if we're really going to engage with what real reform looks like, you have to talk about it kind of in the middle. And that is that there are people who committed crimes, and that is why they're in prison. And that was the case for these people in Attica. And the fact that the way the system ostensibly works is that you have this balance. Someone commits a crime, and then there's punishment by having time taken away from their life, right? Like, that's how we say the justice system is supposed to work. You do not then expect that on top of that, the state dehumanizes people, deprives them of their human rights, returns them to their communities living a half-life where they don't have full rights as citizens. And, I think when you kind of sit with that part of it, you get to some really interesting answers about why crime happens and the way that we actually use prisons as sort of a Band-Aid for what are really social inequities. So I hope that the film will be an invitation to kind of sit in that sort of uncomfortable place and hold those two thoughts in our heads at the same time, that, like, yes, there are people who are criminals who have broken the law and they're in jail, but they do not, as they say in the film, cease to be human beings. And what do we as a society, what are we willing to continue allowing the state to do in the name of not even really making us actually safe, but making us feel safe? And are we okay with the fact that we're essentially warehousing 2 million people today in the carceral system in the United States? And so I really hope that people take the film as an opportunity to really kind of grapple with some of those difficult questions.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. And that's an interesting view. And I think this movie does that. Yeah, because that was something that I was wondering about. So much appreciated. Nancy Green here again. And one thing that I was thinking about while I was watching the movie, as you mentioned, that scene when the guards come in and they're shooting up all the prisoners and you hear, go to your nearest guard, you will not be harmed. It reminded me so much of a sort of dystopian, a sci-fi movie in which you just see complete chaos, and that is the order of the day. And now as we move into different technologies, when it concerns prison reform, and you're looking at things like facial recognition technology, which has been found to have some racial issues. I was reading about something having to do with having technology that would make it feel like a prisoner was in jail for 1,000 years when they were only there for 8 hours. And I wanted to know, what can something like Attica teach us, as we see that history tends to repeat itself with things like this? So how can Attica teach us things that maybe can be avoided in the future?
I don't think that I know the answer to that. I mean, I don't know. I tend to think that the film doesn't necessarily offer any answers. I mean, all of these issues of, the prison system and police abuses and injustices, these are all very thorny things, and they're certainly not going to be addressed by one film. But what I do hope is that the film invites people to kind of ask some of those difficult questions, like the ones that you asked, and really sit with and grapple with it in a way that is not distant and indifferent, but that is engaged and clear-eyed, and takes into account the voices and the humanity of the people who are in prisons.
I think that if the film just makes people think after it's over about prisons, about prisoners, about the 2 million people that are in prison today, then I think in some ways it's done its job. Prisons are there so that we put people away far from the cities, and we don't have to think about them. So if we do think about people in prison for just a little bit, I think the film is doing its job.